The following content has been provided by RWTH Aachen University.
So we got storyboards or flipbooks. This was more like a storyboard experience because it only had one option. To go through, flipbooks are a little more flexible. But what if you have an interface that has lots of different options, and you want to give the user a feeling of interacting with the UI, and you don't want to draw all the screens for every single change all the time. You know, let's say there is something where a drop-down menu appears. You don't want to draw a full new screen with a drop-down menu and then another one where it's gone. So in that case, you can use what's called a post-it prototype. So that's the next up version, a little more interactive than a plain paper prototype. What you basically do is you draw dialogues, menus, windows on post-it notes, and you stack them on top of your basic screen design, sometimes in multiple layers. This allows you to simulate opening a dialogue, closing it again, by just manipulating post-it notes. It's also quick to change because you can just draw another post-it note and tack it on there. So if you want to actually modify your design because you remembered, oh, there has to be, I don't know, maybe a help call out. If I hover over an object for a while, I want to have a little tooltip. You draw a little post-it with a tooltip, and you say, I'm going to now add that to my prototype. You don't need to draw all the screens again. One thing that is helpful if you do post-it prototypes is to have sort of templates ready, empty templates, for example, for dialogues or information pop-ups that appear, or for menu bars, that you basically make ready, and then you can quickly use them to change your prototype, to actually change your design after some feedback from a user. It's also good to videotape those sessions that you do with the user when they go through your prototype, so you can later analyze what actually happened, where the problems were, what worked well. That's a general tip. Videotaping a user session is always helpful because there are often things that you miss in real time when you're doing the actual analysis. So I've got some examples here. Here's a paper prototype. I'm just going to pass this around. This is a post-it prototype, and you guys can check this out. I've also got some big pictures here so you can see it. This is a simple prototype, a post-it prototype with radio buttons and checkboxes. That's what it looks like. It has rows and whatever. It's some kind of setting column for formatting, obviously, some kind of layout. And so let's look at a video on how this is being used. You can see that here. Here's the basic starting screen, and now we'll see somebody hopefully coming in. Let's see. There we go. So you can, for example, take those flip things off, can remove a check mark or put it back. You can change the row height and say it's going to be different. You can change the range name to be some other name. You can put those buttons, switch those radio buttons around and mark up stuff. So it's fairly easy to manipulate and have a almost sort of interactive experience. So the user can sort of imagine a little better what's going on, right? Because you're not all the time flipping out entirely page. And you can imagine if you have a couple of those settings, imagine having to draw all the full screenshots for every single possible combination. That's a lot of work. You don't want to do that, so that's why these things are useful. You can even have expandable dialog boxes. Let's say you've got an error dialog with some error message, and you want to provide the user with details over here. So you can say, okay, if you press details, then what happens is you stick on another box, or you flip out the piece of paper here if you've got it folded over. And here are the detailed error descriptions to that. Expandable lists are possible. So here's an example of an expandable list. You've got a typical hierarchical view here. And let's say I want to know more about the music part here. I can basically put a detailed second post-it over this that shows the sub-menu or the sub-contents of that subfolder. This you can also use to, for example, show drop-down menu selection. By the way, you might say, hey, wait a minute, the games thing is now missing. Well, we've got to put that back. We basically just put the rest, the second part of this, below this. So we've got a sort of rough mashup of these things. Here's an example of drop-down menus. So here's a file menu, and then you can say, okay, I'm not going to select. You can highlight or gray out things. So here, if you look closely, you can see that these are actually tiny little post-its that were pasted over the normal words here, and have the same word in gray to indicate that these things are now grayed out and not active. So this is how you could, for example, do grayed out controls. This is, by the way, some of these pictures were taken from the excellent book Paper Prototyping by Carolyn Snyder. That is a whole book just on doing paper prototypes. So if you're interested in learning more about that technique, I recommend the book by Snyder with lots more images and examples. It's really quite a flexible technique once you've learned a couple of tricks. Here's one that where DIS students were asked, this was also in 2010, to design a user interface for a copy machine that would allow the user to simulate or to manipulate how the copy would look. So like how the image is cropped on the copied page. They used separate pieces of paper and cardboard here to simulate the crop marks, as you can see. And the user can move the crop marks actually during the prototype test, right? So you can actually sort of play with this thing almost for real.
This content was provided by RWTH Aachen University.